Welcome everyone to another broadcast of America's Local Voice show here on your television live, sharing with you the leaders in our community and those who are helping serve us to make this world a little bit better place. In studio today we have Mr. John Wiemann. John, welcome to the studio today.
Thank you for having me here, Carter.
Well, I'll tell you, it is fun to be in the position I am with regard to being able to talk to so many people in our community. As the Cardinal Cowboy, many people are familiar with. I've got the rings on here today, and you get to know a lot of the leaders in the community, the people that are actually the ones who are the movers and the shakers that do help to really make things run and have their foot on the gas or the brakes to figure out what is the most effective way and what we can do best to help our community. So you've taken upon yourself to run for office. You've been in office now for 8 years.
Correct. As
the Missouri Pro Temp, Speaker
Pro
Temp of the House in Missouri, and it's just a fantabulous feature to have you on the show here today. So we appreciate your time. You are now running for Missouri State Senate, District Number 2.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that as we all know in Missouri, we have term limits, and so I've reached the end of my time in the Missouri House. I've served 8 years, and I think, for me to stop at that is certainly something I could have considered doing, but I chose to look at running for state senate because it was an open seat. Senator Bob Anders termed out, and I felt that this was something that I could continue to do to serve Missouri and really make some things happen that could help out a lot of people in Missouri.
Well, good, because we need some leaders like that in our elected offices. And for somebody like yourself who's been on the Cowboy and Judge show as a guest and been a leader in our community for so long, a successful business guy who has run a business that helps, and I'm going to make sure I mention this right, specifically professional liability insurance for health care providers.
Yes.
And running your own business, not a lawyer.
Yes, I get accused of being a lawyer, but I'm not an attorney. I'm an insurance broker. I actually have been in that business insurance business for close to 25 years. I've worked in a variety of insurance companies selling just regular home and auto insurance, but that over the last 15 years I have started up my own firm where I provide professional liability insurance for physicians and other types of healthcare providers, and that's my core business. I still do offer other lines of coverage, but that's what I primarily do that's my real job. My other job, my part-time job, is down in Jefferson City.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that there is, most times you have to have a full-time job, if you will, to help supplement, because we're not all elected officials, those who are. I've never been elected myself, but because it's a full-time paying gig. You're doing this outside of your time, but you also get to hopefully influence a lot of the decisions that are made to help our community, because the laws are what help in our country, as long as they're followed, right, or what help make this country so great. And it's great to have the right kind of leaders in the community to do that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the topics that we might discuss here. First off, tell us a little bit about your family. Family man.
Sure.
Born and raised here in Missouri. Been in St. Charles now for 25 years. Talk a little bit about your family, and you've got 2 sons. And share with us a little bit about that.
25 years ago, my wife, who I've been married to for 32 years, it's hard to believe 32 years we've been married, but it's been great. She's a great woman. I've been blessed to have met her and married her, and she's actually a special needs teacher in this Winsville School District, and we've raised 2 boys. Both of them are, one's actually out of college and working, gainfully employed, and soon to be off the payroll here pretty soon. And then my youngest son is still at the University of Missouri Columbia. He is studying software engineering, and so we're really proud of him, and we think he's gonna do well once he gets done with school. But I always like to brag about my kids that, I don't normally brag about my kids, but both of them are Eagle Scouts. And so my wife and I are very proud of that accomplishment, that not many boys who even go into Scouts get to that level of achievement, and so we were proud that they were both able to do that. So, but we lived in St. Charles County, like I said, for the last 25 years in the same house. We love our community. We live in O'Fallon, actually, off of infamous Highway K, and we've seen a lot of growth in that 25 years. Some good and some not so good, but in general, we love living in St. Charles County in our community. It's just, we think St. Charles County, I call it God's country. It's just a great, great community.
Well, I do enjoy living in St. Charles myself. I'm not technically in your district, but it's nice to get to know some of the politicians that are the leaders in our community. And there's a lot of interesting topics these days that are of discussion. As my father was fairly heavily involved, he was considering running a number of times, I kept up with many of the issues. And we talked about it. He's a college admissions counselor for 53 years.
Wow.
Recently went to the next level, I like to say, and I'll see him again someday in the great baseball stadium in the sky. But somebody who really was adept, and he helped on a national level with the colleges to keep them informed with the national government regulations and got awards along this way. So my point is, I do pay close attention to many of the politics. And so I do want to find out about the issues. And I think a lot of people, or some people are greatly interested in that, some people not as much. But it's certainly something that affects them either way. And I think that we should have a little discussion about that when we get an opportunity to talk to some of our candidates and say, hey, where do you stand on these particular issues? Because they do greatly impact our little planet and the way we live in this country. So with that, the first hot topic that a lot of people have discussed for a long time now, and somebody who's involved in the media on many levels with our shows on ABC and being interviewed by every network by now, and then having social media as a prevalent resource and something you have to figure out the rules and the guidelines and what you can say, what you can't. The First Amendment has become a very popular, hot topic. And a lot of people, what is the First Amendment? The First Amendment, freedom of speech, right? And so in our country where we're fortunate to have that option, tell us where you stand on that, how you figure that feeds into our culture and current situation, given social media and all of the related fields.
Yeah, Carter, on all my campaign signs, from when I first ran for office, I felt it was important to put on my campaign signs and kind of one of my standard themes that I like to emphasize about who I am is I always say I'm a constitutional conservative Republican in that order, because I believe that fundamentally we have to follow the Constitution. And yeah, there's debate as to whether it's a living document, and there's always things that we do change. We have amended it a few times. However, I think the fundamental aspects of our Constitution have not changed and have stayed the same. And certainly the First Amendment is one that is critical to our society. That if we don't have if we're not following the First Amendment, I think everything else just kind of falls apart. And so we have to be very careful about protecting that right and making sure that everyone has a right to free speech and that they can exercise their opinion. And a lot of times I tell people, just because you and I have a different opinion doesn't mean we have to be disagreeable. And so we can disagree, but just not be disagreeable. And I think that's what's happened, unfortunately, in our society, is that we've gotten so hateful. I've never seen the civility of people just decline so much, where before you would never call individuals names and just be so hateful in person. And now I think with social media, it's easier to hide behind the text message or hide behind a Facebook post by saying something that's really kind of what you would not say to that person in their face.
Yeah, and that's part of what we have to deal with regard to freedom of speech. You're allowed to say almost anything in general, except for something that might, and we've had this discussion before, you can't go into a crowded theater and yell that there's some alarm, I want to say it on the air, some alarm going off when there is not, because that can cause some damage. But outside of that, anything that might be detrimental, and specifically, you do have the right, and I would make the argument, and tell me if you agree with this, you need to hear the opinions, even of those you don't agree with, because sometimes that helps us to realize, wait a minute, here's some ideas floating around there that people have that are not necessarily the best for the world, for our country in general. And if you're not allowing them to speak that, you may not know about what's going on. That's the other side of freedom of speech that people don't realize.
Absolutely. That's part of what I've worked on too in the legislature is, with government, I always talk about we should be more transparent. Transparency, you show the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think the more transparent we are, the more willing we're able to look at both sides and hear all the arguments and not try to it happens to the Republicans a lot and conservatives a lot of times that the mainstream media doesn't want to share with the general population our positions. They only want to share their liberal agenda and their woke agenda. They don't want to share the other part of what people are thinking about. And I think that's something that fortunately, we have various mediums now, such as the internet and radio and other things to help us get a more diverse opinion out there that people can make their own minds up as to what they believe in.
Well, great point, because it is true that in America you should be able to hear from all sides. And as somebody who is readily involved in the media, I like to believe that there is some semblance of continuity for all perspectives, but we all know that one of the weaknesses they argue in capitalism is that money talks. And so then where does it buy its influence? And we want to keep that open for all people. And I think the First Amendment is key to that, because if you have other people exerting their influence, like we've seen some networks, they are on the social side of the world, taking control and saying, we have more power, we have control, and another issue that does affect us. Do you agree?
Yep, absolutely. 100%. We have to definitely protect the First Amendment rights.
Very, very important. All right, appreciate that. Another hot topic, going right down the line, when you go First Amendment, a lot of people go right to then the Second Amendment, right? And you get down all of our amendments. These are amendments to the Constitution, which gives us our rights in this country. But there are amendments to those. And first, freedom of speech. Second, the right to, I like to say, the right to protect yourself, the right to bear arms against a tyrannical government, as the initial, and just to defend yourself in general. Give us a little bit of your feedback with regard to that, and to what limits there should be or not, and where does that fall, and how do you feel about the Second Amendment?
Yeah, certainly throughout my tenure in the legislature, we've had several pieces of pretty significant legislation that we've tackled. One is the Castle Doctrine. Most recently was the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which was a pretty serious piece of legislation that we took on in the legislature, where we were really trying to prevent the federal government from coming in and enforcing really unconstitutional laws, where they were wanting our local law enforcement to enforce what we considered a violation of the Second Amendment. So we passed the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which I think was a very good piece of legislation. There's certainly areas where we could have maybe made some more clarification for law enforcement as to what they can and cannot do, but I think in general it was a pretty good piece of legislation. But overall, my position has been rock solid with supporting the Second Amendment. I most recently received the A+ rating from the NRA, which is the highest rating you can possibly receive. I've always been A rated at some form or another with the NRA, and so I think that illustrates that I've been very consistent in supporting the Second Amendment.
Well, good, because that is something that is important to the safety and security of our country, and a lot of people do need to exude the option to defend themselves, and so I'm a strong supporter. At the same time, I believe there's at least some discussion to be had about when you should be able to protect yourself. What kind of guns and ammunition should you be allowed to have? Do you have any particular perspective on the types of limitations that there should be out there with regard to automatic weapons and those types of things?
Right. Yeah, that question's been brought up a lot since this Uvalde shooting. A lot of the people at the doors have been concerned about what types of weapons should be available. Every time we have a shooting, it seems like this discussion comes up about what should be allowed, what shouldn't be allowed. You know, my position has been pretty much, right now, the law is pretty clear with regards to automatic weapons. Those are not legal. You cannot legally own one of those unless you have a special license to do that. So that's not really a weapon that's available to the public in general. Other types of weapons, semi-automatic weapons, I think that's where we have a lot of discussion going on. And I think most people, they say, well, you know, you shouldn't be allowed to own an AR-15. That's an assault rifle. Well, first off, AR doesn't stand for assault rifle. It stands for armor light, and that's where the name of that came from. It's not assault rifle. It's a weapon. It's a rifle that is a semi-automatic weapon, and that can be used for hunting or for target practice or anything else. It's just a gun that looks scary, and I think people are like, oh, we should ban it. No one should be allowed to have a scary looking gun. And I always say it's not the gun that shoots people; it's the people that are pulling the trigger. And really, we should be focused on really trying to identify those people who are individuals that could be a threat to society, and then those who maybe have mental health, mental illness issues that we need to address. But just to say, well, we're going to start picking out specific guns that shouldn't be allowed, that are semi-automatic weapons, and limiting the number rounds that you can have. I think that's a slippery slope that we go down. Same thing with the red flag laws. That's another slippery slope that we go down that we might run into problems with down the road.
So then that begs the question: are we safer with more police, or at least the opportunity for people to garnish their own conceal and carry to protect themselves from the perspective that they can have their own gun on their own person? And is somebody more likely? I think there was a shooting recently where they said it was stopped because another person who was a civilian did have a weapon at hand. And do you believe that's a good policy? Because then that civilian, in this case, helped to circumvent the issue.
Yeah, that actually happened here in St. Charles County, not too far from here, where it was at a particular gas station that an individual was robbing a local gas station, and another person who had their concealed carry license and actually had some prior training, from what I understand, in that type of self-defense and so forth, and they took it upon themselves to prevent this person from robbing and potentially killing the store clerk. So I think in those rare situations, that certainly is beneficial that someone has the training. And I actually have my concealed carry license. I don't necessarily carry a gun all the time. Probably don't carry the gun most of the time, but I have the right to do that and conceal carry it. But we focus so much on the guns. We don't focus on the individuals who are committing the crimes, which they are crimes. They're crimes. When you use a gun in an illegal fashion, that's against the law. And we can pass all the laws in our world, you're still going to have people that are going to do bad things and commit crimes. And we have to start punishing those people. We have to start prosecuting those people. And we have to have, obviously, law enforcement enable them to be able to identify potential threats that might be out there.
Okay. Well, a number of good points you make there, John. And I think that as long as we have a safe country to live in, it's going to be worthwhile to live here. So appreciate you that. Talk a little bit about your feelings with regard to the police and fire and support for our first responders, and obviously a very important role they all play in our community. Mm-hmm. And if you would, talk about that for just a minute to share with us your perspective on police and fire and what their role is.
Yeah, certainly. I think we all believe that it's very important that we have strong support for our first responders, police and firefighters and EMTs and others that help in time of emergency. And so we want to make sure that we have strong support for our first responders, and that means make sure that we pay them well, that we provide them the resources that they need in order to take care of us. So I've always been very supportive of our first responders. Matter of fact, in particular, I worked on an issue, a very tough issue over the last couple of years. I worked on legislation which we just passed last year to help out firefighters who are suffering from cancer, from the death of cancer. Just this past week, I had to attend a funeral for not only a friend, but a constituent who was a firefighter, came down with cancer. And he passed away just about a week or two ago. And it was you hear that story a lot. And so we actually created here in Missouri a cancer trust fund for firefighters. And now there'll be a fund there to provide money for firefighters who come down with cancer. That way they can have money to take care of themselves while they're getting cancer treatment. And the next thing we're going to work on is some long-term disability coverage. But that's the kind of stuff that we can be doing at the state level to help out our first responders. And that's the kind of stuff I have done and I'm going to continue to do to make sure that we protect our first responders so they can protect us.
Very important stuff. Again, those are the people that I personally have an affinity for, because they were the ones who were at the scene where I was in a fatal accident. The driver of our car did pass away, and I was in a coma as a result. Mm-hmm. And those are the guys that literally saved my life. And they're out there to protect us, as we see it. I'm friends with all those guys down at Busch Stadium and out in the community. And you just feel like you need that sense of safety, because they are there to help provide that and keep us as a civil country to maintain our peacefulness that we generally have in this country. Overall. All right, well, let's talk a little bit more of some of the other exciting issues with regard to what's current and what's going on. And I'll jump right in with saying you've been in St. Charles now for 25 years, right, as a resident, living in the same house you built here 25 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Very cool. But you're a small business owner, And so that's where you get more pertinent with me. As a small business owner, you understand really what it's about to be in the community and to be somebody who has to deal with what it is that makes this country go. And I believe 80 to 85% of all business is either done by or completed by or furnished by small businesses. So you really understand that as a small business owner. Along those lines, what kind of bills can you talk about that you have sponsored and had passed in our history as a rep, as serving our country for 8 years now?
Well, Carter, I have, when I first ran, and every year since then, I have run on the idea of making sure that I support businesses, that we provide a business-friendly state for them, and that means less regulations, that means less taxes, in an environment where businesses can be successful. And so I have worked very hard to make sure that I have supported businesses. I've been a member of the Chamber of Commerce both in O'Fallon and also in Cottleville, Weldon Spring area. So as a small business owner myself, I understand the struggles that we have to face every day dealing with running our businesses, and I want to make sure government's not getting in the way. And so I've always emphasized, what can we do to make government more efficient, make government more transparent, to help out creating a business environment that the businesses want to stay here and want to continue to grow. I'll give you another example. A couple years ago, we had an issue with GM, the GM plant, Winsville, and there was talk about that. They were looking at maybe leaving the state of Missouri. They were looking at another location. They needed to do major upgrades to the plant there in Winsville. And they were asking for a tax credit, which most of us conservatives are not big fans of tax credits. I'm not a big fan of tax credits, and I generally am very suspicious of them. But if I can see a legitimate return on the investment for you and I as taxpayers, I'm willing to make that investment in a tax credit for a business. I generally, like I say, I'm not a big fan of them, but on occasion I will support one. And that was a particular case where GM said, hey, we're looking at spending $1 billion, investing $1 billion to revamp our plant. And there was 4,000 jobs there. And to me, that was a no-brainer.
Well, I'd like to share with everybody a little bit about your personal website and information I found pertaining to you on the interwebs. Just do a little quick Google search. And John, because you've been so involved for so long, there is quite a bit of information out there about you. But what is it like with regard to being able to be such a leader and then having the responsibility there pertaining? Because very often, I'm going to put up on the screen for everybody here, they don't get to know you other than they do look at what they find on the internet. And so talk about, here's your website. Everybody can see the website up there in front of them now, and we're scrolling down here. This is johnweimann.com. And tell us a little bit about your site here and what you're trying to convey.
Yeah, as you can see there, it says proven conservative leader. I like to emphasize that. A lot of times we get people that run and say, oh, I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to fight. And that all sounds wonderful, but we need to have people that are more interested in actually getting things accomplished and that are proven that they have done it. And I think my record of 8 years has proven that I am definitely conservative. I've been A-rated by the American Conservative Union. Matter of fact, I'm the only one in leadership. Did you know this, Carter? I'm the only one in leadership that got an A rating from the ACU, the American Conservative Union. No one else, not the speaker, not the floor leader, not the president pro tem or the floor leader of the Senate got an A rating. I'm the only one that got an A rating. So that's pretty difficult to do as a leader in the legislature, because a lot of times we have to vote for bills that are maybe not so conservative because it's a caucus priority, whatever. But so I like to emphasize that I'm a proven conservative leader, and throughout my whole life, if you look at my resume, I've been a leader. I run my own company. I'm president and CEO of my own company. I've always been in leadership positions, even as a young man. I've gone to Missouri Boys State. I was in leadership in Missouri Boys State. So you look at my past, always been in leadership positions, and I think when you look at hiring somebody and electing somebody to serve in a position of leadership, you want to hire someone who's been a leader, right? I mean, that's something that you want to look at, is show me what you've done in leadership. I've been president of the National Pachyderm Club, And it just, the list goes on and on and on of what I've done in my life. And if you look at my website, I have a part there where it talks about Meet John and what I, you know, a little bit more about me and my family and my background. And you can see my family there, my wife Yvette and 2 boys. I'm 6'4". My youngest is 6'5". My other one's 6'3". So we're all pretty tall. We're a tall family. You can see a picture of me with the kids when we were younger. We used to go paintballing all the time. That was fun. And then of course I had someone ask me a question about my picture with the turkey, and I had to tell them. I said, well, that's not an Eastern. That's actually a Rio. There's 2 different types of turkeys. Actually, there's 3 different types, but 2 main types. There's a Rio, which is basically in the south, kind of the south and southwest, and then there's the Eastern, which is mainly here in Missouri. And I actually shot that turkey in Texas, so it wasn't a Missouri turkey. But anyway, I'm really proud of my family, and I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish here in the legislature the last 8 years.
Well, we appreciate you being on the show here to share a little bit about your thoughts and your expertise, your background, and a little bit about what's going on that we may not understand, because we're not out there. This isn't what we do, but we need to hire somebody, like the way you said it. We'd like to hire you to make sure the job is getting done. Yeah. Take a look, if you will, everybody. There is other great information out there about John. Here is his page on the Missouri State government site, and if you want to find out more information, find out how to easily contact him. John is readily available and will answer any of your questions. I've been able to talk to you many times whenever I was running into you, talk to you, been on the show, and just a well-rounded, all-around good guy, great communicator, and just does what is right for our community from all sides that I've seen. And I'm really excited that you took a few minutes to show up here on our show, and I'll go ahead and put your website back on the wall behind us as we finish up here. But John, thank you for your time. And thanks for doing what you do to help our community. My pleasure. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my experience and background and my beliefs. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. John Wiemann, Missouri State Senate candidate right here, District number 2. And check out more information about John. You can see our johnwiemann.com. I'll put that on the page here for everyone to take from the site so everybody can see. But get a hold of John, and appreciate you again coming in and sharing your information with us. Appreciate you. All right, everybody, stay tuned for more. This has been another rendition of our America's Local Voice, and we want to continue to bring this to you because we think that there are many people that need to see and get to meet our local leaders. And I always finish up with a little bit about the fact that the cowboy is the guy who typically has been out there working hard, getting it done. And my tribute to you for taking the time to share with us a little bit about what you got there. And when I see a leader in our community, we tip the hat to you. I'm the workhorse, not a show horse. And yes, and show your support for John, and check out his information there and learn more about him. Upcoming election here, we appreciate you. Tune in for more of what we've got here. Thanks, everybody.